Morning. Be Tuesday. Today is March 31st, and I hope everybody's having a good day. Today we'll be talking about the Chop Source frame jig fixtures, which is long overdue. I haven't had any me time to throw them on. I've literally had frame orders stacked up and just thrown them on the jig one after another, and I knew once I threw those fixtures on that I'd be spending some time with them. One of the biggest concerns for fabricators was that center T-mount versus doing a side mount, and so I went ahead and experimented with a few different options, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's go ahead and jump right into it and see what's happening with peak cycles. So here we have the bottom bracket fixture, pretty much set up the way it's intended to be. I didn't do anything different, and for me this particular setup is perfect. I don't do very many frame designs where the down tube comes down and swings forward and goes back, which was a big concern for a lot of fabricators of this T fixture being in the way. So I'm going to demonstrate a couple other options. Anthony from Flying Machine Bikes beat me to the side mount, which is perfect. I'll show you that here in a bit. However, it doesn't accommodate a wide bottom bracket shell, and I'll show you why. So with that said, I also have a third option where we can do a wide bottom bracket shell and still gain a little bit more room here to get those types of frame designs. Pretty cut and dry. The Chop Source bottom bracket fixture, pretty much set up the way it's intended to be with the T fixture. As I mentioned, it's not a problem for me as I don't have frame designs that swoop forward after the bottom bracket, so I can use that fixture just like it is all day long. As for those who are concerned and do need a side mount fixture for their frame designs, I'm going to show you a couple other options here. The first one is very similar to what Anthony did from Flying Machine Bikes. Let's go ahead and take a look. Version B, which is basically a side mount to where you can get clear under here like this. Very similar to what Anthony did from Flying Machine Bikes. However, I did bolt-on versus he welded. In order to make this happen, you're going to need another set of plates and shorter hardware. I ended up getting this hardware at Home Depot, which is why it's a different grade and color, but pretty much the same thing. The only issue is, or there's a couple actually. I was talking about a wider bottom bracket. We can't move this out any further this way. The other issue is I checked it against the laser on if this bottom bracket is centered, and it is right justified. And what Anthony did to make up for that, from what I can see, is he welded this upright to a plate, of which the plate is now up against this end and what's keeping it bolted in together. So now this would be on the other side, which would push this whole thing that direction and center your bottom bracket. So that there is the side mount version using the existing Chop Source hardware, and may need to purchase a few more bolts and a couple more plates, make it work, but no welding involved at all. As mentioned in the video, if you're running a wider bottom bracket shell, which in many cases for me, I'm doing those wide back ends, I use those 120 millimeter wide bottom bracket shells, and the hardware up top won't move out any further because the upright's in the way. So that's an issue with that particular setup for me. For standard bottom bracket shells, what I was trying to explain in the video is Anthony moved the mounting plate, which is normally on the outside of the upright, he moved it to the inside and welded the upright to it. And what that does is it shifts all the hardware one direction, which centers your standard bottom bracket. So that's perfect. I could be wrong on whether or not you can run a wide bottom bracket shell, but I stared at it for quite some time and I couldn't figure out a way. Meanwhile, over the weekend after I shot those videos, I was laying in bed and couldn't sleep like many nights because my mind's thinking, and came up with a stripped down version of that side mount version I just showed you. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at that right now. I think we may have found a solution for everything. One single fixture to work with any width bottom bracket shell, which I'll show you here in a minute. This here is a 120 millimeter shell, along with the freedom of being able to build your frame underneath. Now, the old expression, trying too hard, I think that's what I was doing with this, trying to use all that hardware that was included with the original setup. And basically all I did was take two 2x2s, welded them together. Make sure you're using an angle like this. When you do that, make sure you square it up. No big deal. And I will show you how this looks with your standard 2 3/4 inch shell. So that there is the 120 millimeter version, the wide bottom bracket version, and worked out perfect. The reason why I didn't go with this particular concept originally, and I did think of it, is in my head, if you watch the first segment with the T-fixture, that the hardware is designed to wing out when it mounts to the top of the fixture. And I had in my head, there's no way that I could move that out for a wide bottom bracket without it hitting the side of the upright. So I went on with all those other versions I showed you earlier. While laying in bed, I said I couldn't sleep, and I'm like, I wonder if I flip it the other way, if that would work. Well, there you go. So let's go ahead and check out the standard 2 3/4 inch bottom bracket. Boom. Our standard 2 3/4 inch bottom bracket. Absolutely no issues. And you know what's beautiful about this setup is once you're calibrated up here, left to right, and you're centered, you should never have to mess with this unless you're changing width of bottom bracket shell. Adjust this up and down based on your frame design, back and forth, and once you tighten it up against a jig, this should be in the same place. Of course, you're going to check it over, but for the most part, you shouldn't have to mess with it. Got all your freedom here underneath for your frame design. Going to trim these down. I went a little wide to make sure I had enough material, but we are ready to set this up for the next frame. There's the 2 3/4 standard bottom bracket version, and again, perfect. With the hardware winging in, and much like Anthony did with his setup, when you go wide, you don't have to flip it back and forth. You can just leave it like it is, slide the hardware back and forth based on the width of your bottom bracket shell, and good to go. Up next, we're going to actually mock everything with an actual frame, see how we're looking. Keep it moving. And here it is in the flesh. Moved everything to the other side, just a preference of mine. I like to have all the hardware opposite side of the chainring side. Before we get started, I thought we'd throw an actual frame on here to see how we're looking. And so far, we're looking pretty good. What I wanted to touch on is, before setting up this fixture, I made sure that the upright was level here, brought it down here, made sure we're level here, and that way you know you're squared up. As for left and right, it's a matter of using the laser level. Sorry, Sean, this one is not yours. This is actually the first prototype tail dragger type 2 that I use for reference and setting up the jig. However, I do have a good jump on yours, of which we're going to put this new fixture to the test. The only downfall of this whole thing is I already put my stickers on, and now they're on the inside. Damn it. Let's go ahead and get things started. What more can you ask for? Looks good to me. Really looking forward to using these new fixtures. As for fabricating that upright, it's really no big deal. It's no different than the T-fixture that it was intended for. Just make sure you're using an angle, like I mentioned in the video. Make sure you're square. Once you tighten it up against the jig, should be good to go. I'm going to touch on one more thing before we move on to the dropout fixture. Go ahead and take a look. The last thing I want to touch on before I pull this frame off the jig is this fixture is designed for easy access when welding in the bottom bracket. In other words, this upright right here is normally in line with the cones, which makes it difficult to reach this area because it's in the way. So what I would do is I would weld the easy access side, let it cool, and then move this upright to the other side and finish welding it. Right? So as you can see, with the upright in the forward position, that the coatings have full access, which for me is a fantastic feature. So there's that, and as mentioned in the video, moving those uprights away from the cones really opens up that area of being able to weld around that bottom bracket. ChopSource was very adamant about when they designed these fixtures for them to be very accessible no matter what area of the frame you're working on, which brings us to the dropout fixture. So let's go ahead and take a look. Got the rear dropout fixture in. And man, I gotta say, I love this setup. Had my dummy axles cut for the Nexus 3, and I had another one cut for the Sturmey Archer, the wide 120 millimeter dropout space in there. ChopSource does provide these. Loosen these 2 Allen screws, slide this out, throw the other one in, done. Move this up and down accordingly for the wheel size. Super stoked. There's the rear dropout fixture, also designed to be very accessible when welding in your dropouts to your stays, and that quick release dummy axle. It's a fantastic feature. At the end of the day, I'm not being paid or endorsed by ChopSource in any way. I could talk them down as much as I've been talking them up, but I really don't have anything bad to say. I'm just merely passing off information that hopefully is useful for you when investing in your tools going forward. And if anything, we're very fortunate to have a company invest their time and resources toward the bicycle industry, especially with frame jigs. That's pretty much gonna wrap it up. Hope you enjoyed today's version of what's happening with peak cycles. And until next time, make it a killer day.